Yeah, Rick, how has the rollout gone? I know we're about a month, maybe a little over a month into since the new version came out. How has that gone
Yep,
from your perspective?
5 weeks. Yesterday is how long it's been out, and uh, it's been very well received. We haven't got a lot of significant bugs. We're about to probably in the next week or two push out our first update, 26.0.2, that'll have some additional good fixes in it. Probably the best one, and I can talk about when I do the presentation, would be the ability to set which inspector you have, the new
Oh, good.
smart one or the old classic one. So that'll be popular. Um, yeah, so far so good. And of course, it's intertwined with the announcements related to FileMaker agentic coding that's coming later this summer. So the combo of those two and the number of features that I'll talk about that are sort of foundational that can be taken advantage by those things. So yeah, so far so good.
Is the agentic coding going to be tied to your model provider, or is FileMaker going to have its own model that it uses for that?
No, you'll be I think initially when with the developer preview, it'll be tuned primarily for Claude Code. But our intent is you can use with Cursor, Claude Code, Visual Studio with Claude Code embedded, Claude Desktop, other things to be pretty agnostic because it's just too short-sighted to force one to because this space has evolved so quickly. In
Right.
1 week, this is the best one. 2 weeks later, this is the best one, right? So we're
Mhm.
trying to make it open as possible.
That makes sense. So it's a little past 4. We normally have people kind of stroll in, but I think we can get going on the presentation, and if they miss it, they can watch the recording.
Okay,
Um,
what I'll do is let me try sharing it. And I want to see if when I go into presentation mode, I can still control it through Zoom because sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. If I can't, then I'll just go out of presentation mode and just walk down down. That'll work as well. So let me give that a
sounds good.
try. Uh, and you can see that.
I can.
Okay, and then let me go into presentation mode and see if I can still control it. I can. That's good. Okay.
Okay, great.
All right. Do you want me to start?
Let's do it.
All right. So, hello, everyone. I'm Rick Kalman. I am one of the Claris platform evangelists. You probably mainly know me from my over 2 decades in product management at Claris. Been there about 26 years. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present on the enhancements we've made to FileMaker 2026, and which has been out for just about 5 weeks. Probably the first thing about FileMaker 2026 is if you go into FileMaker Pro and look at the version, it is version 26. So we have finally aligned that. So there's no more translation of, oh, it's version 22, it's version, 2025. And so and Apple did the same thing to make it, just more clear when these things come. You may have, since we've been out 5 weeks, and we have presented on the feature set of 2026, you may have already seen me do this. The thing that has transpired since then, we have 5 weeks of feedback and context of what people are doing that allow me to add color to this. We also have the advent of what we announced in early May by Ryan McCann of what's coming later this summer, which we're now referring to as the FileMaker Agentic Development Toolkit. And there's a number of things in this release that are foundational for that direction that we're going. So as we're going through this, I will talk about that just to tell you where we're currently at. Last Monday, we went into a private small ETS of the first drop of the Agentic Development Toolkit, or ADT. There's about 25 people worldwide that are giving us feedback. and then we're using that to do our first version that goes into developer preview, which will be open to anybody, right? Anyone that's interested in it will be able to download it. And I'll talk a little bit more about it as we get to those parts of the presentation. So let me go to the next slide. So we have essentially identified five major themes that are running through the 26 release. This is a pretty significant release in that there's about 120 enhancements and about 115 customer facing or customer impacting bugs that are in this release. So spanning FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Go, FileMaker Server, WebDirect, and so on. So it's turned out to be a rather significant release, and we've essentially broken it down into these five areas, or themes: disaster recovery and business continuity. There's a number of developer productivity enhancements there. Some of these things people have been asking for as long as I've been here. Remember, I've been here 26 years, because we call this developer quality of life. And we have a new initiative that I'll talk about when we get there that allows us to begin to cherry pick some of these things that we weren't prioritizing before, that we now have a mechanism to do that. Of course, like every release, we have a number of platform stability and operating system support enhancements, so frameworks we've updated and so on. Some enhancements to the user experience and accessibility of WebDirect specifically made a pretty big leap forward in making WebDirect accessible to people that use screen readers, that have visual impairments, that are following standards. And that's something that nonprofits, companies or nonprofits receiving federal funding are required to accommodate people. And so we get pressure from larger institutions and large universities and so on over the years. And now we have something pretty robust, and we're continuing to go down that path. And then I'll point out a number of what I call AI ready architecture enhancements that in and of themselves are useful in FileMaker Pro, but also are foundational and will be taken advantage of when we deliver later this summer the ADT or FileMaker Agentic Development Toolkit. And as we get to that section, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the business recovery and or disaster recovery and business continuity essentially are two new add-ons for the FileMaker platform coming out of server. And I refer to them as add-ons because these are additional services that you can buy through our web store or by talking to sales. That so they're add-ons. They don't come with the platform. The first is FileMaker Server Remote Backup, and essentially what that does is exactly what it says. We have for years had backup, obviously, in our FileMaker Cloud. And as you probably know, our FileMaker Cloud is really something that's run for us by the teams at Apple, but it's running on Amazon AWS infrastructure. And so our backups behind the scenes are going into S3 buckets in the region, depending upon where you are in the world where we have our data centers. And so we were able to leverage that for our on-premise servers. And so this is a new capability. I think it starts off to get the service initiated. It's $100 a month, and you get your 5 gigs, and then you can additional pay another 100 to get in 100 gigabyte increments. I'll go into a little bit more detail on this in a second, but essentially, it is set up through the Claris Customer Console. And some people have not been exposed to what that is before, but now more and more are. It was used for things like Claris Studio, for Claris Connect, and it's used for Claris Cloud. Now, a FileMaker Server customer with the appropriate license, which is everything but a few, can go in that Claris Customer Console, and they can set up remote backup. And they only set it up there to instantiate the S3 bucket. And then what they do is, and I'll show you screenshots in a second, they travel over to the server admin console, and then they bind that storage bucket to that instance of server. And you can break up that backup drive into a number of different drives and sizes and so on. And what it does is every 20 minutes, just like FileMaker Cloud. So it'll do an initial, backup of things. That'll be the longest it ever takes. And then it just does the incremental updates every 20 minutes. And so you are having a backup. And the important thing and why this is part of disaster recovery and business continuity, especially for people that don't have IT departments or hosting partners that have already taken care of this for them, is it gives you a backup of your data that is not physically in the same place as your server in case of some disaster, unforeseen earthquake, fire, missile coming in from somewhere, which has happened. The data center's gone, right? You don't lose all of your data. Ransomware, right? If you have a copy that the person hasn't encrypted your ability to access it, you can go back to it. So let me show you some of the interface. So this is a screenshot of with my server license of the Claris Customer Console, or CCC. And in here, depending upon, this is the same thing that you use to manage Claris Studio if you're using that, Claris Connect if you're using that, FileMaker Cloud if you're using that. It's the place you go because these are services to say, here are the users and here are the rights I grant them. It's a place that you go to say, this person is my team manager. So essentially, you're making them like a server administrator. So you control all that there. The other interesting thing about this is it is another way to get access to all the software that you have entitlement to, sort of like your ESD page by going over to subscriptions. So you can download FileMaker Pro. It'll point you to FileMaker Go, and it's just a handy place to go. You'll be able to get your server license and that sort of thing. And then you'll notice there's a new top right tab that says remote backup. And that is what's new to 2026. And that's where you go to be able to set up this remote backup. So this is what it looks like. I clicked on that create new drive button, and I set up a 15 gigabyte drive. I think I have 100 gigabytes here. So I set up a 15 gigabyte one and gave it a name, Rick 15G. I can name it whatever I want. I can have a 100 gigabyte drive. I can slice and dice it to whatever I want and give them different names depending upon my uses. It'll apply to any server that you have a license to. But at any given time, you can only have one backup drive for that physical server. You can swap them out and then that sort of thing. But if you have multiple physical servers, you can point them to various of your data buckets. What happens here when I first set up and asked to set up or instantiate remote backup in S3 bucket, and of course, S3 and AWS, that's all completely abstracted away, just so that you know where this actually is. What it'll do is it will generate a drive ID. You can see that right underneath the RIC 15G. It'll give a drive ID and a drive key. And you can see there's little icons to the right of those, which I click on to copy because I need those because then I travel over, and I'll show you that in a second. I travel over to my FileMaker server admin console, and then I go to the remote backup tab, and then I give it those credentials. And that's what causes this backup drive in Amazon to be able to know it's talking to that specific server. And I go ahead and set that up on that side. Then I come back over here and see that, and I approve it. So that it's probably the same person, but it could be two different people, right? And so it's just so that you have control over it. So once that server admin has set up the connection to the keys you gave him, probably the same person, but could be two. Then the person who set up the remote backup comes over here and says approve, and then it'll tell you it's connected. And now you have the connection between your physical server and the backup. So this is now in the FileMaker server admin console. And you can see there's a new tab, the fourth one over, called Cloud Backups. So it is separate from your normal backups that you're familiar with, and the schedules and whatever you're doing there. That stays the same. We haven't intertwined them. That makes it just a little bit cleaner. But now there's a new place you go over here. And so if I had been given the keys and the credentials for that remote backup, I come over here, I click on register storage, I enter those in, and that tells me that this FileMaker server is connected to that S3 bucket that was set up in the CCC. And from there, then I can see that it's connected once it's approved on the other side. From then on, it's very much like your normal scheduled backups. It's almost exactly the same as if you're familiar with FileMaker Cloud, in that every 20 minutes it's going to take an incremental snapshot of any changes and apply them, so it doesn't have to take the hit of downloading everything all the time in a gross fashion. You can preserve backups because they, I think, rotate through. I can't remember the number of days, like every 30 days, whatever. They just sort of rotate through. But you can preserve any one that you want, and then we'll keep it there. And of course, it tells you what's hosted and so on. So that's the interface for that feature. The other thing under disaster recovery and business continuity is standby server. Now, this is literally another physical server on a box, on a container snapshot you may have set up, however you end up doing that. And it's literally a second server running, but it's now a secondary server. So now FileMaker has the capability of your running server. And if you purchase the add-on for standby server, then it gives you the interface in the server admin console to set up that second server as a secondary server. And what happens when you set that up, same thing with remote backup, is it will take a complete backup of everything on the primary server. It will then place it on the secondary server, and then it will continually watch changes as they come, and it will bring that server into sync. And I think it's every 5 minutes. So at the very worst, if your primary server went down and you cut over to your standby server, there may be 5 minutes worth of data that's stale. It's pretty much in sync. And so with this first iteration in 2026, it requires someone to go in the server admin console and promote the standby server to the primary server. So if your server goes down and you hunt down the person, we've all heard the horror stories of a server goes down, and it could take, maybe days, depending upon what happened, to get back up, or certainly hours. Business continuity is completely broken, especially if you have a heavy dependency in a business on things going through FileMaker. This is about a 5 minute cutover. Probably the longest amount of time is the DNSs have to get in alignment, or you have to give to the person the new address. What we are working on currently is to go to the next step and have it essentially hot. So if the server goes down, it just cuts over to the primary. The other interesting thing about this is that you can sort of go back and forth. So you can have a primary server and a secondary server. Your primary server goes down, you promote your secondary server to the primary, and then you go over and figure out what happened on your primary. You can then turn your old primary into the new secondary. You don't have to, go the full round. You could, but you don't have to. So it's pretty versatile. If you are more interested in this, probably the best resource is that on a daily basis, Rich Carlton at Rich Carlton Consulting runs FM Training TV. And he did an entire session that was him and Jacob Taylor, one of his staff members, who literally walked through live the entire setup, bringing down the server, showing what happened, and talking about it. That is available on YouTube, and for free, obviously. And I'd suggest that if you're interested in that, it's a little bit more than an hour. Watch it on 2X, it'd be half an hour. But they literally walk through real time with real servers and talking through it. And they worked with us quite a bit prior to shipping and continue to work with us for improvements there. So this is the interface for this inside the server admin console under the connectors tab. At the bottom now is standby server, and this is where you go to set it up. And so here, for instance, I'm in the admin console and I said, I want this to be the standby server. And then it gives you setup instructions. And as it's setting up, it'll walk through this list and it'll give you a green check mark as it completes itself. And once that's all complete, then you have your system set up. And then there's information that you fill out about it. I think that it requires a fully qualified domain name, not just an IP address, and so on. But this is the interface. Like I said, it probably is worth watching the 1 hour from Rich Carlton and Jacob Taylor. Next is a slew of developer quality of life enhancements or developer productivity enhancements, about 20 of them that we put in there. And like I said, some of these things people have been asking for a long, long time. Now, what happened that's new, and a bit of the backstory here is back at Full Access Conference in Los Altos last year, Ryan McCann came, the CEO of Claris, and he came for a Q&A session, had lunch with us in a Q&A session. And during that session, somebody stood up and asked about, sort of these little enhancements. They might even refer to them as developer quality of life. And we got into a discussion. And one of the things that I said, I stood up and I was talking. Ryan was sitting there taking the Q&A. And I said that one of the things I always found interesting is when I would be at DevCon or an Engage, and we were doing a keynote address at the big kickoff for the meeting. And as a product manager or director of product management, I would present on, say, hey, there's this great new enhancement. And then I would bridge to another one. And sometimes when I bridge to another one, I would throw in one of these small developer quality of life enhancements. And invariably, I would get so much more applause for those. And it just would hit me. It's like, oh, it's the little things, right? It's the and I liken it to this, if you know of this analogy of the old fable of the boy that removes the thorn from the lion's paw, and the lion does not eat the boy, the lion loves the boy because he removed pain. And so my theory is when you're focusing on developer quality of life, you're removing pain from a developer who day in and day out, week in, weekend out, year in, year out, decade in, decade out, is having to, they're almost crazy. Like, why is this the default? That kind of thing, right? So out of that exchange, Rich and I were driving Ryan back to the office. So I had an opportunity to talk to him because I work remote. So I wanted a chance to talk to him. And he asked me to set up a new process at Claris, working directly with ClayMaker, where we would identify these developer quality of life enhancements, get feedback from the developer community to help us sort of prioritize them, and then begin to knock these things off anytime we had an opportunity in a major release like this one or in updates. And so we came up with a process. We got a few of them in, but I had prior, when I was the director of product management, I'd run a couple of developer quality of life kitchens. We had a huge backlog. So that's how we ended up with 20 of those, all said and done in this release. So a number of things. For instance, you now have the ability to control entry in a field using a calculation that gives you much more versatility and prevents some of the workarounds you had to go through before. If you have more text in a field than is apparent and there's no way to indicate that, or if you do, then the person can edit it and you don't want them to. So this new enhancement gives you the capability to control that. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty eloquent. But what it does is it prevents all of these different workarounds that people were having to do in order to get that. So it's pretty much just this, right? Here's a look at the interface. And now you have the ability to, in that pop down, when it's in browse mode or find mode, that can the person edit it? Can they select it only? Can they view it only? or set what the behavior is that you want by calculation, right? And so then you have much more control over. Before, I think there was two things you could do. And now you've got a lot more versatility. So that one's been something that a lot of people have been excited about. People have presented. Rich Carlton a couple of times, 3 or 4 times, has had developers come on for his hour and FM Training TV and share what their top 5 or 6 features are in 2026. And this one comes up quite often. The other one is you may remember, I think it was in FileMaker 2024, we gave you the ability to sort custom functions and folders, but one of the things that you lost was the ability to control sorting in the way that made sense. And so we heard that. We came back in this release and just enhanced the ability. So when you sort, so in FileMaker 2025, you can see if I have custom function folders and I'm sorting by function name, and I've got folders, I've got this funkiness of I have function 1, 2, 3, and then 5, 4, right? But if I come to 2026, you can see that it does the proper thing. So if I'm on function name, it's function 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I reverse that, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So just a small one, but something that people had called out as they wanted that functionality as well. This is one I have heard about since I joined FileMaker in the year 2000. And that was, why do I only have these 4, 5, 6 choices for zoom level? How come I can't set a zoom level for, whatever I want more precisely? And so that now we have in the product, and it's very straightforward. You're familiar with FileMaker, and here are the choices you have in FileMaker 2025 and before as far as zooming, especially if you're going to set this up in a calc for a window and you're trying to dial in exactly that size. And all we did is come back in and add custom. And you can go anywhere from, I think 25 is the lowest, all the way up to 400. But any increment and decimal point in between is now, you can just set it by calculation. So that one, you guys had to wait a long time for it. It's not that big of a deal unless you need it, but there it is. This one is a real sleeper. This one has gotten a lot of attention. This one has had entire sessions on it on FM Training TV by Jeremy Brown, I think. And it has its own thread now on the community where people are essentially saying, tell me the things that you are starting to do with this. I call this a sleeper because I think it's going to have quite a bit of utility as we go into the FileMaker agentic development era that's just coming later this summer. We essentially, originally, I had asked for this when I was running product management as a follow-up to the JavaScript add-ons. With the JavaScript add-ons, there's this fragility of when you set them up. They create some layouts and some scripts, and they're hard to change, and you get this sort of cruft in your solution. You've got layouts you have to deal with that are nothing more than having set up the add-on in the first place. So one of the things when working with Clay is, can we not have a place to store this that isn't in a table and have to be in a layout? And so in some ways, although it's not 100% accurate, Clay sort of refers to this as the quadruple dollar sign, right? The single dollar sign, and you have these globals that last either through a session or while the file's open. Well, this is something that when you put something into it, it travels with the file and it stays with the file, and it even survives data migration tool migrations. It's essentially metadata. So this is a place, if you have add-ons, you can store all the JavaScript and the stuff that's supporting your add-on in the persistent data store. And it's a very sort of straightforward feature in that you use a script to add something to the store and give it a name, give it a unique ID, and then it stores it in there, and it is with the file. And then you also use that same script if you wanted to delete that. And then there's 2 calculation functions associated with it. One is when you're asking for that data out of that store because you're going to use it somewhere. And then also, when you want to get a listing of all of the things that you have stored by name, you can now, we've already got some feature requests to take it to the next level, and we're already looking at those in developer quality of life. So primarily we did it for JavaScript add-ons, but I believe that it's going to have quite a bit of utility for what's coming with agentic coding. The other thing is, and I'm sure Stephen Blackwell would agree with me, is do not use this as an ersatz security system, right? Because remember, well, you can control if you can have access to that script or not. You can't control if the person uses a calculation and guesses the name of the catalog and then gets what's there, and you've stored username, passwords, credit. So don't use it for that, right? But this is a place where you can have user preferences that maybe you had a table of preferences or just about anything you want to store. So this is the script step dialog. When you set it up, give it a name. It can be whatever you want. Now, one of the requests I've already gotten is people want that to be calculable as well. So I'm working with Clay. He's got some reservations. I don't remember exactly what they are, but we'll work through that. Because there's some more versatility that you can, the more you can automate and control by calculations and variables and that sort of stuff, there's just more and more utility for it. As people figure out how they're going to use this, you give it an instance ID. It can be whatever you want. It should be unique. And then you put in whatever you're putting. So once you click value, I could put all my JavaScript for an add-on in there. If I open the script to this one and I wanted to clear it out of the store, then I would just hit the delete radial button. And then there's just the two calcs associated with it. Is when I want to take that data out of the store and pull it into FileMaker for whatever I want to do with it. Could be, a big gob of, CSS and HTML that you're feeding a web viewer object. It can be whatever you can think of that you could store. It could be base64 for, images and whatnot, but you use this calc to get it out. And then you use this calc if you want, you give it a name, because remember, each one of these has a name. And if you give it the name, it will show you all of the things that are stored. The name's sort of like a hierarchy. You can have something called invoice, and you can have 5 or 6, whatever number of different things under that category. And then it will list that for you. Some of the other feature requests we've gotten is to make this easier to be able to get a list of all the names and all of the catalogs, if you will, associated with that. So that's that feature. There were a number of scripts and calcs that were added in 2026 to give you much greater control through scripting of PDFs, to create the PDF, open the PDF, append to the PDF, print it, save it, and to do that all through scripting and that sort of thing, so that it's and so there's quite a bit going on here in what it now is capable of. You can go across multiple layouts and assemble a PDF. You can put it where you want it, and so on. No plugins obviously required, but there was a lot of excitement. This really came in late in the ETS, so people didn't know a lot about it ahead of time. But there's much more capability and control that you have now via scripting with PDF. Then there's a whole number of other things we did, and I won't deep dive into all of these, but you can now, there's a calculation now where you can get the count password days remaining before it expires. We've made some enhancements to the custom dialogue for, to have a native scroll. We support the WebP container format. Mark LaRochelle was someone that I was talking to, and he was really, really excited about this. And it would have been lost on me, but he said, this is about 50% the size of a PNG or JPEG. And I store a lot of these in container fields for customers and backing up and for performance and saving a backup. This is really going to help me a lot. So he was really excited about just that little thing alone. You see other enhancements. You can now do ODBC credentials by calculation rather than having hard coded. Got more control over the height and the width and the position of the custom dialog. And then also you can determine where you want the blank record to sort at the top or the bottom. So just little things. That's why we put them under developer quality of life. Got some capability now of flashing web viewer cookies, so that you can make sure that you don't have something stale there, and just other ones as well. Now, one of the things I can do, Justin, if you want, is I can give you this deck
That'd be
afterwards, and
great.
if you want to distribute it, that's fine. Um, Adaptive Inspector, some know it as Smart Inspector. This has not been very popular. I have to let you know. In the next release coming, we will give you a setting in the settings to determine, do you want that new one, or do you want the existing one you had with the 4 tabs? The new one is only 2 tabs. It's supposed to be more dynamic in the sense of showing you just the things that you're interacting with, but there's more scrolling, and it's not quite completely having parity with the old one. So we will give you the control to decide which one. Now, right now, if you did not want to use the new inspector, you do have the ability to bring up the other one through bringing up the new inspector. Some people don't know that. You could even bring up 4 of them and have them different screens, so you don't even have to tab through them. But there will also, in the next update, will come out a number of enhancements to that inspector as well for some of the things it doesn't do. Then we'll make a determination. Does it make sense to have 2, or should we just sort of say it's a failed experiment and be done with it? So we'll make that decision. But in the meantime, we'll give you the control. Um, so here is what the new inspector looks like. Just has the 2 tabs: appearance and data. Depending upon what you click on, one or more objects, then it will dynamically populate the things that are most related to it. So anyway, that's that one. The next theme for this release is platform stability and support. Number of things we've done here. You can now run multiple SASE processes on server, so it helps with with bandwidth. If you have the enough processors or processes, why not take advantage of them? It doesn't bottleneck and that sort of thing. You can still control it in the ad server admin console, determining how many processes you want to run, or there may be some plugins that are only expecting one process, so you can even dial it back down to that. This also is sort of a precursor to agentic development. When you're starting to have agents that are autonomously asking things of FileMaker, then having multiple processes can keep from the bottlenecks that may happen there. So it's just a way of hardening and making the server and the back end more and more performant, because server is going to become more and more the workhorse as it receives API requests, through AI. And of course, in this era, between the RESTful APIs and OData and the data API and JSON, FileMaker is no longer a data island, and so the server is needing to be more and more robust. That's why we're doing things like standby server, some other things I'll talk about in a second, and having multiple processes running for server-side scripts. This is related to that in a sense. So we have now the ability in 2026, if the web publishing engine, which essentially drives either WebDirect or custom web publishing, OData or the data API processes go down, we will auto restart them. And we will continue to put something in the log letting you know that something went awry, so that you can go and investigate. But you don't have to have someone who's a customer or an end user who's using WebDirect, and the web publishing engine goes down, and they have to contact the person. They have to come to the server. They've got to restart the processes. None of these require, they're separate processes. None of them require a server restart or the restart of the server main processes. And so they'll just auto hill. Again, this becomes more critical in the agentic development era we're about to go into, where because you really don't want an AI to go out there and do something with OData, maybe some CRUD operation, and it can't do anything, right? So because the process went down and required a human to restart it. So it's sort of self-healing in that way. Um, Next is you finally have the ability to export field contents on the server. If you're familiar with, and I'll show you this in a second, the interface for Script Workspace, you can go in there and say, show me all the scripts that are supported for WebDirect. Show me all the scripts that are supported for server. Show me all the scripts for Go. And it will gray out the ones that aren't supported, so you're not trying to create a script for something that's not going to run because it's not the right environment. So what you'll see is that now here I am I've chosen, okay, show me server compatible, and export field contents is no longer grayed out, which means I can now export the contents of a field directly on server. And people have done shell scripts, workarounds, robots to be able to do this kind of thing. And now you can just do it directly. Begin to pair that with some of the new, PDF workspace enhancements we've made. And again, we're just trying to knock down some of the elaborate ways that people have to go about doing this because we didn't support it directly. So those were the developer quality of life enhancements for in Pro and Server. We did make a number of enhancements to FileMaker Go, besides the fact that FileMaker Go supports everything we did in 2026, specific to that platform that hardware. Now you have the ability to turn on the flash or the torch via the script. So if you're doing something like barcode scanning in a low lighting event, you don't have to manually turn that on. You can just take care of that for the person. For our developers and customers in Japan, FileMaker Go now supports the Japanese calendar, the error based. Sometimes in official government or legal documents, they're required to use the error based calendar, and it's based on who the emperor is. So I remember in one of the releases, we had to VRev our product because they were getting a new emperor, but they didn't know who the new emperor was. And so until the emperor was named, we had to sit there and wait. And then we updated and pushed out an update. So it's a big deal in Japan, sort of esoteric for us. Couple of enhancements to Windows UUID so that you can make sure that when you're doing things with a different environment, on iOS devices, so that you make sure that you're acting upon the window that you expect to work on, so you can get at it by the UUID and make sure you have more control there. Made a number of security and framework updates. So we've updated OpenSSL to 3.5 LTS, which that gets supported all the way to April 2030. Updated Apache Tomcat. We now support Windows Server 2025 and it's certified to run there. We've made some enhancements to IPv6 because more and more these are getting used because all the IPv4 addresses are pretty much used up because the internet has just expanded that much. Of course, we're fully compatible with Mac OS 2026. Some enhancements on FileMaker Server on Ubuntu to be able to control and specify the user. And then the other thing is you can, through Server now, you can install just the server admin tools, the CLI tools through the insisted install text. Okay, next theme, user experience and accessibility. This is primarily stuff around FileMaker WebDirect. The first one, as I was talking to you earlier, is about WebDirect is now almost all the way there for accessibility, even supporting the official standards. We're continuing to refine that so we can get 100% of that. But essentially what this means, if someone relies on screen readers, they have a visual impairment, without this, it was really hard for some navigation. You're in the toolbar, or what's the proper way to walk through that, so that it explains it to him, because it's got to say it out loud, it's got to verbalize it. And we had put in some, back a few releases ago, some accessibility capabilities, and you could control tabbing. But this just makes it a lot nicer, and you don't get it for free. There's nothing you have to do from your file. You just go into the server admin console and turn this on, and it will screen read through the status toolbar, and it'll screen read through your app. So here's the interface. It's under one of the connectors as well, under web publishing. And then you have the option to turn on enabling, or you can disable the accessibility keyboard navigation. And then this will, you can see it's ARIA compliant. And this is what, the readers, screen readers expect. Anyone who is in this area, this will be recognizable to them, but it goes a long ways to helping those, big institutions, a lot of colleges and universities and nonprofits and governmental organizations would always have pressure to do this, and then they would usually get some sort of waiver, but it became harder and harder not to do. This was the right thing to do, is to accommodate people who want to use your software that have visual disabilities. It's just part of the ADA Act, and that's in the U.S., but there's most governments throughout the world have some sort of regulations that's similar. They do in Europe and Australia and other places. Otherwise, we've done some additional things to the WebDirect platform. We've updated the JDK because the web publishing engine and Vaadin, which is the technology behind FileMaker WebDirect, relies on Java. So we've updated the JavaScript or the Java JDK on that. There was an issue when you were using IPv6 addresses in WebDirect, where sometimes it would render a blank page. So we've addressed that. There was some enhancements to WebDirect cookies that now they include self-same attributes. So it helps prevent, cross-site vulnerabilities, things that, may make it insecure. And we had a bug where it would take about 1 to 1.5 seconds when you're tabbing past a popover button. So we've addressed that as well, just tweaking the performance. So those are enhancements made to WebDirect. And then, of course, WebDirect, like FileMaker Go, will also now support the Japanese calendar I spoke about earlier. And now we get into our last section, which is the AI-ready architecture. As I say, this is in a way a follow-up to what we did in 2025. In 2025, you're most likely aware, we put in a number of AI scripts and calculations in an AI model server if you wanted to host your own models in FileMaker Server in 2025. So some of these are enhancements on top of that, but a lot of these are the foundational pieces we need in FileMaker to make it a better target for agentic development, which is coming later this summer. So one of the first things here I'll talk about is field annotation. Now, this one is a little bit interesting, and it's a sleeper because essentially they packed two separate features in one dialogue. And so it may not be apparent what's really going on here. But the first off is you now have the ability, and before there was this funkiness of in the comments, if you put in square brackets and you put LLM, then AI would know that, that is meant to talk about what that field is for or what that table is for, and I'll read that. So now we just go much more directly. We have the ability when you're in the managed database and when you're on the field and you click advanced, this dialog I'll show you in a second comes up. And what it allows you to do is for that field to type in and say what it is intended for. And what this helps with is essentially large language models that are trying to do something with FileMaker hallucinating because they have absolutely no idea what your AA underscore, blah, blah, blah means. It's esoteric to it. So what does it do? It makes its best guess, but it doesn't know. So what you can do is you can have that field, but you can say, the intent of this field is XYZ. And then that tells the LLMs more, it gives them more than it needs. It helps it to be more accurate. Now, the other thing about this dialogue that is interesting. So here I'm in the fields of a table in managed database. I've clicked on the advanced option. It's pulled up this new dialog. That's where I add the annotation. It then socks that away in the data definition language, or the DDL, and that's what AI uses to understand the schema and the structure in total of the FileMaker database when it begins to interact with it. But the other thing we did here, which is really interesting, is you'll notice this customized field display names. And if you go into that, this is what you're going to see. And it's just using JSON, and it's giving you control over the names that your end users will see. So if you use a naming convention because you want things to sort a certain way that's meaningless to your users, you now have friendly field names, which is something people have been asking for forever. And we now have these, and it's pretty straightforward. So you can say, okay, I want, anytime that this field is showing up, I want you to have this name. Or when I'm doing an export, then I want it to have this name. When I'm sorting, I want you to use the friendly field name, not my esoteric name. Or when you're in table view, the column headers, I want the friendly names, right? That kind of thing. You can control all this through this straightforward. The interesting thing about this is because it's a calculation, you can, for instance, say if the operating system is running is French, then use this label. If it's Italian, use that label. So for our developers, especially in Europe, that may be selling solutions in multilingual, you now have the capability of setting the name of the field dynamically by the locale or any other thing that you want to do. So that's where I say we did something for AI. We also were able to take that layout and also give it friendly field names. And all of this is related to where we're going, because the more precisely the LLMs that are probabilistic can understand the intent of what FileMaker is doing, which is deterministic, the less chance you'll have of hallucinations, if you will, because there's more and more knowledge. Now, when the agentic development toolkit comes out, one of the things that we'll have that pretty much makes it deterministic, even though you're interacting with it with natural language through AI, is something that if you go to the Soliant website and go to where they have blogs at Wim de Court, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, wrote an excellent blog about AI harnesses. And that's important because what that concept is, if you in the agentic tools give it the skills and the tools and the knowledge on the, like say you're using Claude Code or Cursor, it has tools and skills and MD files where you can tell it who you are and what your persona is, and you can begin to dial in your environment. So what a harness does is it's essentially, in a way, like putting RAG into FileMaker and going, your source of truth isn't the wide open internet. For 40 years, what people have talked about to do in FileMaker, the good, the bad, the wrong, all of that, and then try to guess what the right thing is, right? That's what, if you are only using the sort of let me ask and get an answer, and the model was trained on the internet. Because who knows what was right, what was wrong, and it certainly doesn't know. So that is sort of, you don't want that, right? That's how you get hallucinations. That's how you get AI telling you, hey, just use this script. And you say, but that script doesn't exist. It never did, right? And then, oh, you're right, because it tries to accommodate you. The harness essentially says, if you are going to add this object, or you're going to write this script or this calculation, this is the definitive structure of the XML that you need to manipulate, and do not go outside of that. Once you have that in there, then you essentially you can use AI and you can get deterministic results on the FileMaker side, because it's bounded to what it is. Now, this is a labor of love because there's like 600 separate, script and calc forms. Every layout object has its own. A lot of it is not documented, so it had to be reverse engineered. But this is what's going into the coming agentic toolkit. There's I talked about this a second ago in the dialogue, defining advanced field options, and that's where you have the control over, where do you want to do this? Do you just want to do it in table view? You just want to do it when your customer's exporting data or when they're sorting data. The places where you have to go, gosh, they're going to be confused if they're not going to know what this is. So, what can I do for them? And there are workarounds people did, but this is much more straightforward. And then it's got a pretty good help article on it, defining advanced field options, be worth looking at because I think this one's a real sleeper as well. Base table comments is very similar to field annotations, but now, excuse me, now you're telling the large language model what this table represents, what kind of data is. This is a customer table that has my customers in it, their addresses, blah, blah, blah. You tell it what the intent of that is because it's going to go off and it's going to interrogate the DDL. It's going to know the structure. It's going to know the tables it has access to. And the more it understands about what is contained within those tables from what you're telling it, the more control you have over the AI doing what you expect. So these are things that you can do that. And the other thing is, in order to get ready for agentic, development toolkit coming later, this summer, they may be the kinds of things you want to go in ahead of time and start annotating your fields and your tables, at least those ones that you think you might want to begin to, for lack of a better word, vibe code FileMaker. And I'll talk a little bit. Actually, I should talk about it now. If you read the blog article from Ryan McCann, our CEO, that came out at the very beginning of May, where he talked about what we're doing at a high level. We followed that up at the end of May with a webinar. Right now, as I said, I think that last Monday we entered a private ETS of about 25, 30 people worldwide that have got their hands on our first version of this, giving us feedback very quickly so that we can get out to the general developer preview that goes out to everyone. What these things, there's going to be 2 plugins. And when I say plugin, I don't mean FileMaker plugins. I mean agentic tool plugins, like the ones that are in the marketplace for Claude Code or Claude Desktop. And sometimes they may have a different name, but essentially these are extensions that you add to your toolkit that then gives it knowledge about FileMaker specifically. So there'll be 2. The one we currently have in ETS is the first one. That one is the ability to use natural language models or LLMs to write scripts, calculations, custom functions, create layouts, put field objects on their build. I've used it in testing to say, I want a classic order invoice line item system, make these tables, blah, blah, blah. And FileMaker's not even open. All it has is my words. And then it literally builds that file for me. It just goes off and does it, right? So that's the first one. That's the one in ETS. That's the first one that you guys will get in the developer preview. Probably a couple of weeks following will be the second one, and that's the UI one. If you're familiar with ProofKit, it's essentially doing exactly what ProofKit is. So you can then use your agentic tools like, say, Claude Code to point it at a FileMaker database and tell it the interface that you want. It will create something using all of the modern frameworks. You can use React. It'll create the CSS and the HTML, and essentially it will even push it into FileMaker in a web viewer object initially, and eventually it'll probably be a different layout type. But because of that power, you can create layouts that are absolutely impossible to do in FileMaker, or would be an incredible amount of work. And you just get it by telling it you want it. And what it does is then communicates with FileMaker through the data API in OData. And essentially you have a CRUD solution. It does things like, rich data tables that have a lot more that we have talked for 20 years about putting that in FileMaker. Such a heavy lift that we never got to it. But now you just tell it you want it and you have it, because this stuff is all over, with JavaScript and React, and there's just all sorts of frameworks out there to use. It would it would take us 100 years to bake these objects into FileMaker, and now they're available. So the combination of being able to build the schema and the structure and then to put on a new interface is really where we're heading. And so there's a lot of, but it changes a lot of the rules about how you as a developer create, because now you're more of an orchestrator than the person that has to move the pixels. This is the calculation for the base table comment. So you just say, here's the file name, and then this is the base table name, and then you can put in the comment. We've made some significant enhancements to the save as XML and the solution upgrade tool, because we are leveraging those for our agentic development. You probably know that almost everything in FileMaker is expressed in XML. And we have been working for a while on the ability to be able to deserialize FileMaker into XML and reserialize the XML into FileMaker, and then to push those patches in through the solution upgrade tool. So one of the things that we did in this release is, when you're under the tools menu and you say save a copy as XML, it doesn't just push out the entire gigantic thing. You now have the ability to granularly control what catalog or catalogs are being pushed out. And that's important, because the smaller the thing that it is you are acting upon with large language model, the fewer tokens have to be expended in going through that entire structure. You'll even notice here that persistent data store is one of the catalogs. So the way that FileMaker stores these things, all of these things have catalogs behind the scenes. So all of your scripts are in a catalog, all your layouts are in a catalog, all of your functions, your table occurrences. And now you can just spit out the XML for those alone. One of the things you see down in the checkboxes is this option to include details for analysis tools. And when you click that, and when it pushes out the XML, then tools like Inspector Pro and some of the other ones will receive that additional information that'll give you more intel when you're using things like that. So this allows us to do some very interesting things a lot quicker with the Agentic Development Toolkit as well. It's taking advantage of that. We now also support Google Gemini as one of the models that wasn't supported out of the box in 2025. So we've added that. And we've continued to make enhancements to the RAG functionality, which is essentially the augmented retrieval, where you can point to a PDF document or other documents and say, rather than going out to the internet and doing your probabilistic, because you're a foundation model and last time you were trained is in December of 2025, you can just point to this document and then it queries that. A lot of our developers that create solutions, especially our SBAs that have vertical market solutions that are pre-built and they sell to customers, they're using it now to allow their customers just to use natural language to query their help systems. And it's pretty successful. So we're continuing to enhance that. So you can see here in the AI services tab of FileMaker Server, this was introduced in 2025. If you turn on and enable RAG in that AI services setting, then up comes all of these other things that you can control. You can have multiple RAG spaces. You can import them. So you may have your server, sometimes you want it to use this space, but other times you want it to use that space. So you got control over it there. But we've also taken it a little bit further. And once you have this set up, you can go and you have, you give it the API keys and stuff it needs. Even in the FAC now, you have the ability to chat with your data through RAG right here if you're trying to test it. So that's the enhancements we made there. Um, the Another enhancement to the solution upgrade tool is the ability, as I was telling you, I was already doing this, but I didn't even have FileMaker open. I just told it what I wanted. It created the greenfield file, and then it began to progressively build out the table structure, the scripts, the calculations, the layouts, the objects, testing it. And then what it does, it's essentially taking the XML, it's acting upon it, and then pushing it back into FileMaker through the solution upgrade tool patch mechanism. The thing that's interesting is that CLI tool is essentially a command line interface, right? So those are rather esoteric. They're almost contra FileMaker, right? Because you need to know all the secret incantations, but if you do, you can tell it to patch a file. The large language models are super, super good at CLIs. In fact, if you play with Claude Code, which is a CLI, it's a CLI that you can talk to and tell it what you want. In fact, if you have no instructions whatsoever about how to install something, like I did when I got the first plugin for agentic coding, I just asked it, what do I do? Help me set it up. And it will do it for you. So it's not this chat that you do. So this new agentic development plugin knows how to patch files through the CLI and just does it on your behalf. And we have all these check mechanisms like don't push it out there until I get my eyes on it, that kind of thing. But it's almost like magic. It's really sort of impressive. And so some of the things we've done in 2026 are laying the groundwork for allowing us to do these kinds of things for what's coming next. Here's an example of what you would have to do in the solution upgrade tool in the CLI in order to patch a file. But with LLM, you would never even see that, or it would pass by. But if you had verbose, tell you what it's doing, but you would not have to interact. You would not have to write this. It knows what to do. Um, AI model server, we've made some additional enhancements there. The thing about AI model server is we put this in. It's something that runs off of the server because if you use AI, then and you use these, things like Claude or Anthropic and these frontier models that you're paying for tokens on, and they're essentially cloud services. And so you may be sending data back and training it and giving it personal customer information or other things that are proprietary to your business. You don't necessarily want to do that. And how much do you trust, even if they say they won't use it, that they won't, right? You just don't know. So a way around that is just to have your own model, right? And so that's where we have an interface in the server admin console to be able to go to places like Hugging Face that has literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of models there that all do different things, that are tuned for different things, that are different sizes, and so on. And you can run them right there on your hardware. Nothing goes out to the internet, and you don't pay for tokens. However, no, there's no free lunch. So you may pay $20 a month, and that's enough for you for Claude Code to do the kind of things you want, or maybe you get the $100 a month model. If you go down the path of hosting your own models, then it needs beefy hardware because it doesn't need a CPU as much as it needs a GPU. That's why NVIDIA is making so much money. It turns out that some of the best hardware on the face of the earth for crunching through these kinds of things is the Mac operating system. So it's hard to get Mac minis now because people are beginning to buy them up and they're running them to run their agents off of because it is just as powerful, if not more powerful than NVIDIA, right? So it may cost you $8,000 to have something beefy because you don't want it running on server because it's very resource intensive and it could probably bring your server to the knees. But you got to think about it. I put $8,000 on, my data is protected, and I have my data is protected, and I have what's the term I'm looking for? I've lost it. But anyway, so you're in complete control there. There's something I'm trying to remember about telling you about. Oh, you don't have the cost of the tokens, right? So think about, you're all hearing horror stories of it's really easy to blow through $100 of tokens and not even realize it. Some companies got a bill for like $50 million. And it's like, oh my God. In fact, some companies are hiring back people they let go at entry level because tokens are too expensive. It's sort of ironic, right? So that is a way for you to control that world. The thing about Hugging Space, there's so many models. What you can do is dial in because you don't necessarily need the biggest, beefiest, most expensive model in order to do everything. So what people are starting to do now is taking one of these more expensive frontier ones, have it do the upfront thinking and sketching out of the plan, but once it has that, feeding that to a model that's smaller and cheaper, therefore, because it doesn't need all that power to do that. So there's a lot of that going on. I think best practices are still being worked out. One of the problems is there's so much choice that, how do you hone in on the one? But there's a lot of, you can control the costs in a number of ways. So anyway, that's sort of the AI model server. That is coming also out of AI services, tab in the server admin console at the very top, model server. When you go ahead and turn it on, it'll tell you it's running. And then it has an interface where you can go in and it'll take you over to Hugging Face. And then you can choose something you want, download it, and then it'll start running it on this end as well. So you can see here, I've got a number of models I downloaded. It'll show me they're downloaded. I can turn them on from here. And then depending upon what the model does, you can't have two of the same that at the same time to do the same thing, but you can have one that is processing images and one that's doing text. And I think there's another one, maybe one that's doing RAG at the same time. You can't have two because it doesn't know which one to use if they're choosing a model for similar kind of behavior. So that's FileMaker 2026. The five themes: disaster recovery, developer productivity or quality of life, enhancements to the operating systems we support and the frameworks and security, enhancements to WebDirect and accessibility, and then the continued AI features in preparation for what's coming next. Other than that, there's nothing in this release. So I open to questions. If anyone has them, I can answer whatever I can.
First of all, Rick, thank you very much. This was very I went through everything that I could possibly think of that happened in FileMaker 2026. Um, I'll start with the question, and then if anybody else has a question, feel free to jump in. Um, Going back to the field level behavior, um, and being able to set by calculation. A number of our customers are some of their users have FileMaker 26, some of them have FileMaker 25, maybe some have the FileMaker 24. What happens if you use that set by calculation on a field and a user is using a previous version of FileMaker?
Are you talking about the friendly field names or?
No, I'm talking about to be able to set like whether it's editable or view only on a field.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's I think it will just default to obviously it can't work, but it's a good question. I don't it's because it's not going to know anything about that calc, right? I don't think
Mhm.
it'll do anything nefarious, but good question. I haven't heard that asked before.
All right. Um, and I'll ask you another
And
question.
if anyone knows on this call, feel free to
Yeah,
chime in.
if anybody's
Believe it or
testing
not,
that out,
I don't know everything about everything. So,
probably something where we could probably test out in 5 minutes and find out. But that just it came up in my mind when you brought it up.
huh?
Um, for the append to PDF functionality, the new functionality there, does that work with PDFs that weren't originally created in FileMaker?
Yes, I
Oh,
think so.
great.
I think so. Good question though. I think so. So, but before my knee jerk, yes. Um, certainly the ones that it does generate, because you look at it, it also, yeah, it gets the because we had this problem where it depended upon the time, the kind of PDF it was,
Mhm.
right? On Mac, it could, could use live text and stuff, but if it would had come from OCR, it's a different format, right? And we couldn't really use that, but now we can. So leads me to believe that but it's a good question. I'm not, and it might depend on, because you can set up security in a PDF doc when you're saving it off. So it may
Right.
have something to do with that too. But that's another thing that'd be good to look at.
Yeah. Well, I know if you set security on a PDF, that ruins almost everything. But assuming that's not the case, that would be if it could do that, that would definitely save some stress.
Yeah, another thing for someone to experiment on because I just don't know off the top of my head.
Cool. And then the get persistent data seems like a really cool new functionality. Is there any limitation on how big the value is? I know people were mentioning they're putting HTML, which is probably a pretty big chunk of data.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I think it's essentially going to hit the same limits that FileMaker has, which is quite a lot, right? So I don't remember. I know I've seen that question before, or it's so gigantic that it doesn't matter, right? If it does have a limit, it's really of that, because you think about text, most of the space in a database is probably taken up from stuff in container fields, right?
Mhm.
So text in and of itself is, not that much, and this is always expressed as text. An image will just be base 64 in this thing and just regenerated. But I think if it has a limit, it's so large that for all practical purposes, no. And if it eventually does, and someone finds out they threw like 50 million lines in there and it puked, then we'll hear about it. But so far we haven't.
Yeah, I think I think you mentioned in probably the next version, it'll have the ability to see all of the
Those
persistent
are
data.
requests. Yeah, those are requests we're getting. Some of them I think we'll do because the problem is this is there's a mix of what you can control
Mhm.
and what you can't, right? So you can control it, someone using that script because you can set it so that they can't use it, or you can just give them full access for that script only. But the calcs, if they guess the name of your store,
Mhm.
then it'll return to them, right? Those, and then from there they might figure out how to get to it. So it's and then you can ask it for the data, right? If you ask it by name. So that's why we don't want it to be used for security, or shouldn't be a place you're storing username, password. Just like you shouldn't use a table that oh, it's not available in the layout menu. Well, ask Stephen Blackwell. He knows how to get around those things left and right. So I think he refers to them as ersatz security system. Just use the FileMaker stuff. So, but a lot of them that we got make sense, right? So right now I've got a list of 5 things that people asked to enhance that, which is pretty good to get that kind of feedback right away, which means people can see some vision for it. And so right now Clay's going through that. He had some reluctance to use it. They let you set the name by calc, but I don't remember what it was. And I want to go back to him and make sure I understand that. It's interesting about this developer quality of life function that Ryan McCann has me and Clay doing is, obviously Clay's chief architect. He's been at Polaris for 40 years, literally 40 years. And of course, I ran the product management team for over 2 decades. And I'm not a product manager anymore. But the way we set this up is we have a definition of what developer quality of life is and what we'll work on, and it's called low hanging fruit. So Clay is the arbitrator of low hanging fruit. Our definition of low hanging fruit is if a single engineer can deliver that in 1 to 2 sprints, which means 2 to 4 weeks, and they do not need a FileMaker product manager to explain it to them and work with them to make sure they dial it in, then go ahead and knock it out. And it comes off this. This is another story. A number of times I have been at DevCon I don't remember this happening at Engage, but at our dev cons, we'd be there for 4 or 5 days and stuff. Someone would talk to Clay in the hallway. Someone might talk to Chris Krim in the hallway, ask for something. They'd go back to their room. Of course, they have the source code of FileMaker on their laptop, and they would implement it right then and there. And then guess what? It could take 2 years to get it in the product. Very, very frustrating, right? So this is a way of saying, screw that, give it to Clay and Rick. Clay will know if it's low hanging fruit. He'll feed it to a developer, and then we completely bypass product management. We have an agreement with product management of if it's not low hanging fruit, it goes to them because it means someone has to manage it. It's going to expend engineering resources, and then you got strategically what should I work on. But these things can go in the cracks when an engineer is done with something and has some time, they can go off. And some of these things only take hours, right? Our just definition is no more than 2 sprints, which is 4 weeks. Most engineers can single-handedly cut out quite a bit in that, and they wouldn't have been able to do the inspector in that amount of time. That thing was a beast, right? And probably shouldn't even have been done. But so anyway, that helps us knock these things down. That's why we're getting stuff that I can remember people asking for the entire 26 years I've been here. And so it turns out it's not that we couldn't do it. It's that when you've got 1,000 things to do and you've got a strategy and a place you're heading, you've got to make these, I can do 30 things in a release or 100 things in a release, but there's 1,000 things people want. You've got to make some hard choices, right? So this gives us sort of a way that, the product managers, it's like, I can't even put my headspace there. It's not strategic enough. But we're hearing directly from developers, right? And comes to us. I put it on a wiki page. Clay goes and triages it. We throw it in the queue. We feed it to engineers. A lot of our engineers in China, they knock these things out, or the other ones. So we've got some good ones. Got some significant enhancements coming to value lists that David McKee is working on. We have one I'm really excited about is finally the ability for you to determine all your defaults and have it be sticky so that we don't decide for you which is on or off by default, but you can decide, like in your scripts and all that. Some things that drive people crazy, right? Like, why do I always? And it's usually the ones that I'm always going to change it, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
why is
like
that the default? Yeah,
the go to record after
yeah,
last
yeah.
that one, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, rather than us flipping it, and then we're going to piss off anyone that wanted it that way, just let you determine yourself, right? And then have it sticky so it remembers. I mean, it's so brain dead simple if you think about it. But those are the kinds of things we're always looking for this grandiose thing to do that's going to change the world, and we forget that you guys live in our product day in day out and productivity. It's like if I can give you time, that's the one thing you can't buy, right? So that's why people like this stuff. I gave you time back, or I took some irritation. And from our point of view, and this is what Ryan really wanted, it is an indication that we're paying attention, that we care about your experience, and that FileMaker as a platform is every bit alive and vibrant because there's they're focused on Studio, they're focused on this, they don't care about FileMaker anymore. Those kinds of things go around, and there has to be more than words. There needs to be a visible expression of we care, right? And so this release has gotten a lot of excitement for some of these things, which is really interesting. I'm not surprised, but I'm pleasantly I'm happy because that's what we thought. Because we not only did we want to do it, but we wanted to let you guys know we did it, right? Because we want to set up this sort of they do care. This platform is alive. I can still rely on it, and that's why we ended up going down the path of agentic coding,
Mhm.
because everyone and their brother has this productivity enhancement, and here FileMaker setting is this binary file that's really, really hard to do that with because of the nature of it. A year ago, it was not very good. It did a lot of hallucination. A year later, these models have gotten so, so powerful that around the end of December, the beginning of January, all of a sudden you could start doing things very, very interesting with this in FileMaker. And it wasn't until February of this year that Ryan McCann came to me and Martha Zink, who's now our manager of developer relations at Clara. She used to work for Reliant and she worked for Proof. Ryan asked us our opinion because we were telling them we're hearing from the community, why are not you guys giving us this stuff? Right. And so we wrote a position piece. We said we absolutely should do it. It's an existential threat to FileMaker development if we do not, because of everyone in the world's doing it. Ryan looked at that and he said, I agree. And now look where we are. In that short amount of time, we're about to deliver the first salvo of FileMaker Agentic Development Toolkit. This is not what we did in 2024 and 2025. What we did there is we put in AI capability that then you could build into your solutions to give to your customers. But we didn't give you anything to help you build those solutions. And
Mm.
that's what this is, right? And so, some of you may know all this week, Rich Carlton is running a training class, a week-long one, where he's spending time, one, helping people set up their environments, Claude Code, Cursor, whatever, get them, help them to understand about, what MD files are, what skills are, what tools are, what harnesses are, all of that, so that people have an understanding there. And then they'll install ProofKit and they'll start playing with that. And then they'll start doing FileMaker stuff. And all of that is to get the community ready to hit the ground running when we're giving them these plugins. And then from us, as we deliver this as a developer preview, we'll also have a lot of resources for things like, what you need to do to set up your environments, all of the things people need. We'll be doing community lives. Those will all be recorded. They'll all be socked away on YouTube and other places as resources. There's a lot going on right now. And it's, so the comment, and then one of the things we had to look at is that we came a month ahead of time with the announcement from Ryan McCann about Agentic Development Toolkit. Then 2026 comes out, and one of the dilemmas we had is, okay, people are going to go, but you said this, why that? Right? Well, luckily, it turned out that 2026 has a ton of foundational things in it that prepare for what's coming next. So then we had to do essentially what I'm doing is make the connection between what's coming and what we did and how they're related, because on the other side of that is a whole new world. I mean, let's face it, it's not FileMaker. It's everyone who develops software in the world is being impacted by these new capabilities big time. It has sucked all the oxygen out of any. I've been doing competitive analysis for 6 or 7 years, and you almost hear nothing anymore except AI and vibe coding or agentic coding. It has sucked all of the oxygen. And, it's a weird thing because some of it's hype and we're in the curve, but a lot of it isn't. And what's happening is it's a technology that if you say it doesn't do this, that technology can make it do that. So it's really it's just it's a hyper cycle. It just keeps building like this. And on top of that, it also can be addicting, right? I'm hearing stories of people that are coding until 2 in the morning, people that are going on vacation with their freaking agent, people who have given a name, right? I mean, it's it's addicting because especially if over the years, because I started as a FileMaker developer, and then once I was a product manager, director of product management, I did less and less product, development, just like Andy Lacates did and stuff. And so you just fall away from it. But when you start using these tools and you start applying to FileMaker, it's like you're back there when you first discovered what you could do, right? And I contend that when FileMaker first came out, it was vibe coding. That was it, right? I mean, a mere mortal could do something without having to be a DBA or computer science. Just if they were technically savvy and they had a problem they were motivated to solve, they could pick up FileMaker and they could solve it. And it's addicting, right? And so it has that feeling. So that's the kind of thing where the more and more you get used to it, you got to be careful. You can get giddy. But my thing is this: we don't yet know how much AI can do for you and how much you'll still have to go in and tweak. So it's going to be hybrid. Like for instance, do I really want to expend 10,000 tokens to tell AI to move an object on a layout 41 pixels over? Why don't I just go in
Mhm.
there and do it? Right. So knowing where those lines are. The other thing that is interesting is our concept of time. So if you're using Claude Code and you ask it to do something, and then you're staring at it, asking it. So I asked one of the first things I did was a hello world thing, and I asked it, "Hey, build a layout, from scratch, and then put a button on that layout, and that button have a script that opens up a custom dialog that says hello world, and then have a field with the person's username, first and last name, and put their name in there." So then I asked it to do that. The early plugin took like 10 minutes. I'm going, I could have done that in two. And so I'm thinking about this, right? It's like, and then I realized, oh, this is agentic. Why am I sitting there watching it? I just tell it what to do and go off and do something else. And I can tell a bunch of agents to go off and do stuff, right? The other
Mhm.
thing we're finding out is obviously it's you are the still the missing ingredient because AI doesn't know nothing about nothing unless you tell it what to do. And
Right.
so you're the ones who spent years and years and years talking to customers about what they were trying to do in order to get at what you have to build in order to do that. And those skills are exactly the skills you need to be able to get AI to do your bidding. But the other thing AI is not good at is you've got to worry about, is this thing secure? Who can access it? Where's the data going? Is it performant? With multiple users, it doesn't can't do those kinds of things yet. So you're still responsible for that. And on top of that, you're responsible ultimately for what it is you put in the hands of your customer. So you have to be the QA. Now, the thing is, you can tune these tools to do exactly how you want to do it. You can give it your best practices, your naming conventions. You can tune that, but still you're going to want to go and lay your eyes on it because it is still not 100%
Mhm.
deterministic, even with a harness, right? All of us are still trying to figure out where are we because it changes all the rules, but it's still FileMaker. Right now, the thing about FileMaker that's a beauty is that you can vibe code some great websites and all that if you can figure out how to get them, deployed and what about authentication. But if it's in a FileMaker file, everything that the FileMaker file has for security, encryption, all of that stuff just comes along for the ride. So you sort of have your cake and eat it too. So it's early days. It's going to be really, in fact, I think we're going to see a renaissance of discussions once this goes into public preview of just all the possibilities because I don't think anybody knows, right? It's just too big. And but to me it's fascinating of like my thing is now is I like I told you I think I gave it a prompt that I test every time as we get new builds to from scratch build the classic orders, invoices, line items, customers. It could have been students, teachers, classroom, that kind of thing. And I go back to the canonical things that Jerry Robin used to do in relationship training back in DevCon of how people get their head around, because with invoices, you have to deal with things like lookups, right? Because it's an historic thing. So you don't want someone to change an invoice after the person's already gave you money because it's a legal thing. And so there's a nuance in there. So then if you test these things, say, could it do this? But the other thing I don't know is it doesn't polish it, at least with the schema and the scripts and the calcs and the layouts. You would still have to go in there and then make it look the way you want. But with the other plugin, that polishes it on steroids. Now the combination of build the structure and then so I look at it and go, we're at the precipice of separation of data from structure. And as long as I've been here, and people that know 4D and Servoy have asked for that. There's some intricacies in FileMaker, but guess what we have now that we didn't have before? The data API, OData. RESTful APIs, JSON, all of these things that AI can take advantage of and knows very well. So it's very exciting, and also at the same time, it's not clear where this
Mhm.
all ends up, how far you guys can get, and what the true implications are. And then people are thinking about, gosh, what are my business models now? Do I still charge by the hour, or what do I do? People are starting to think about this stuff. But I think that our determination is absolutely experienced developers are still necessary. You're the adult in the room. This is like a very eager new intern or developer who you still need to check their work.
Yeah, I'm just kind of look at the landscape of people doing kind of vibe coding like web development projects. You hear every day about somebody doing something and it wreaking havoc, either costing $50 million or building a site and having their Google API key, publicly accessible. So having the person who knows what they're doing seems like a something that will still be needed for a while.
Yeah, well, imagine socking away in a persistent data store, your token key, and then someone comes across that, starts using it. Next thing, you get a bill for $5,000 because the implications of that. Now it's costing you money, right?
Right. Well, Rick, thank you very much. Are there any other questions that anybody has for Rick before we close up shop?
I will, Justin. I will send you this deck. Feel free to distribute it to however you distribute your recordings and stuff. And I think some people may already have that, but you're more than welcome to have it. It's completely public for
That'd be
sure.
great. I'll share it with the group.
All right.
Thank you, Rick. Oliver, I see you're in here. Commiserations on your countrymen. They lost the World Cup
It
match
was
today.
really close. Thanks for, yeah, well, they did much better than they've done for the last 3 or 4 World Cups. They get it
Mhm.
on the way.
I'm still mad at Belgium. So.
Yeah, the only thing that was worse now would be losing to France in the third place game. That would be agony. But I can watch it.
Nobody cares about the third place game.
Well, not except England if you're playing France, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's true.
But I must admit the whole thing, apart from Donald Trump rescinding red cards and stuff, um, the whole thing, just looking at the stadiums and the mixture of cultures that are there, it speaks to who America is. Because a lot of people are tourists, but when you watch Iran play and you watch half of the one end filled with Iranian flags, that's the diaspora, and a lot of it is, and it's really inspiring to see it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's really good for America in soccer because it's really a lot of excitement from this, and it couldn't have happened at a better time, right on top of our 250th anniversary. So at least we
yeah.
didn't lose before that.
Yeah, well, I was hoping they were. It was 10 minutes left, and they were one up, and they lost 2-1. They went into a 5-man. If anybody's interested, you can clock out if
Yeah,
you like. But
they parked the bus, right?
they packed. They went to 5-4-1, which is what they did against Mexico, but this wasn't Mexico, and they just didn't have any firepower outfield. So the attacks kept coming and coming and coming.
Yeah, yeah,
Argentina were much better at getting good ones in place than Mexico were. And then, they had one chance to go 2 up when they turned over the ball. They squandered that. Back when it was hard to tell. I mean, if it had worked out, you'd have said Tuchel was
yeah. I
a
I was also happy that we didn't have an all European semifinals. It's nice that we at least have South America in there. It would have been
yeah.
nice to have Africa,
I
but
hope
if it's going to be a World Cup, you want it to be the world, right?
yeah. I hope for Messi's sake they win. He's been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he's been good. All right.
Yeah, thanks for
All
your
right.
sympathies, guys. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Oliver. I know you reached out about presenting next time. I think that would be great if you're available to do that.
Yeah, it's well, it might be a little provocative because it's about what might happen after Draco,
Okay.
which is sort of tendentious, but I was going to throw out some ideas just for people to consume.
We can be provocative here. I don't mind that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll put something together.
Okay.
Because I think you can actually feed AI the entire DD export file and say, write me an app that will sync all these tables to a SQL database, say, and make it a two-way sync in real time. And then there are lots of SQL tools out there, like Odoo, for example, that can consume that, and then your whole FileMaker database gets all that functionality, bookkeeping, mailing, a whole ton of it. So it was sort of that thought. I don't know, Rick, if you think it would be provocative and unsporting me to do that, you can tell me.
No, look, I've been around long enough that we don't shy away from that kind of stuff. It doesn't bother me. I like provocative.
Okay, yeah. I've had one customer quit FileMaker for most of the usual reasons, that just database performance, WAN performance issues, the complexity of getting it to really click when you're dealing with large databases and stuff. And then they wanted analytics and stuff, and they went to they looked at Zoho, then Odoo, and then something that you may not have heard of called the Frappe framework, which is out of India, much smaller than those two, but the same idea. So we'll see. Okay, I'll do it next month. Or if you're going to take August off for vacation, Justin, or are you going to go to September? Or
I mean, if we have something for August, we can do August. I'm cool with that.
whatever works. If you find well, maybe we can do it as a show of hands. How many people are going to be available in August?
Well,
Who thinks
we haven't had we've had a number of people drop since, but I'll be
Okay.
here for August, so
Okay, good. Well, you and I can talk about it
we
anyway.
can chat. Yeah.
Okay. Take care. Thanks.
Alrighty. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Hey,
Thank you
Justin,
again.
this deck should be in your inbox right now.
I got it. Perfect. I'll
Okay,
send it over
cool.
to the group. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye.
Okay, bye.